So mostly just the rural parts. And you know what, I absolutely love my district. It's great. It's very rural. The people are amazing. I'm glad to be here. So I'm a freshman, as you probably know, at the State House this year. And we're going on to week 6, right, guys? So we've finished 5 weeks. So we'll be going on into week 6 of this General Assembly, the 90th General Assembly. And it's been a whirlwind. I've learned so very much. Not only is it just constant bills, but it's just a lot to learn in terms of procedures and chamber rules and all of the things like that we do. So I just want to comment on some of the really popular things going on right now, including everything related to education, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. Has been a very hot topic. Since we're doing agriculture, I am on the Natural Resources Committee, and our most popular bill so far has been about raccoons. Okay? That was my first subcommittee, was on a raccoon bill. And so I think that's probably going to be my signature piece for the year. And so I'm sure you farmers in here, yes, you can legally dispose now of those raccoons without having to call the DNR. Well, I should say, actually, we haven't passed that yet, but we've got through committee, so it should be up to the rest of the House pretty soon. And of course, it needs to get through Adrian's side of the building. But yes, that's been an interesting conversation, and you'd be surprised how many people want to weigh in on just the raccoons. So lots and lots of stuff going on. I don't want to take any more time from them, but I look forward to hearing your questions and doing the best we can to address them. Thank you.
Oh, you got one.
Sorry, I'm used to transferring that over at the Capitol.
Me? Good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting us. Thank you to God for this beautiful day that we can come together and work together, celebrate, and just enjoy the peace and prosperity that's been so generously bestowed to us. So, yeah, I think it's the 7th week of legislative session, but I might have lost count. Things are moving. Do you know?
I think it's the 36th week.
Oh, okay. Well, so just on that note, things are moving very fast. This is my 3rd term, so I'm Jeff Shipley, serving Mount Pleasant, Fairfield, and Van Buren County. And without a doubt, this has been the busiest session that I've been up there, not just in terms of the number of the topics we've been addressing, but the depth of the topics and how, you know, the things we're talking about really do have a very big impact on the lives of Iowans. So my couple of things. Next Monday, we'll have a government oversight committee where we're continuing on the school literature obscene material discussion. And boiling it down, what we're trying to determine is what are the contemporary community standards for what's suitable for minors. And it's been controversial because there has been an influx of literature that has very graphical depictions that I find inappropriate for someone my age, let alone a child. So if you're interested in that, basically on Monday night, we're going to be talking to some of the school administrators and school board members who have been advocating for this and getting them to explain what is the literary, artistic, political, or scientific value of these items, because frankly, it's unclear. And you really, anyway, so there's a whole list of these titles, and you go into them, and some of them do read like like a penthouse letter type thing. It is pretty graphic, and it is very kind of concerning. So we're going to be following up on that on Monday. The other big discussion in Education Committee, boiling it down, is that the state of Iowa needs to decide what are the best methods and practice of teaching gender identity and sexual orientation in schools, meaning what would be the most age-appropriate, grade-appropriate, way to introduce these very, in my opinion, very mature concepts. I know there's people in Fairfield that, they feel entitled to demand that gender instruction needs to be in kindergarten or pre-K. And anyway, so there's a lot of discussions about that. The bill that was passed out of Education Committee on the House side limited it up until through K through 6. which is, anyway, so that's where that's at now. But I think there's still a lot more discussion. When we bring these bills to the full caucus, there's usually a lot more input. And this is one of the discussions. I mean, we need everyone in Iowa weighing in on this because this is basically foundational to how we're bringing up our youth. And, you know, the concept of identity, personal identity, it is going to necessarily impact them for the rest of their lives. So it is a very consequential discussion. It is very emotional. And that's, I think, where I've been trying to really comprehend and sit and listen to understand the kind of various concerns that are out there. We've been having a lot of conversations on that. But again, I just want to reiterate that this is basically a wide open conversation. We need as many Iowans as possible providing input because whatever comes out of committee, we still have to talk it over a caucus, and there's really not a lot of consensus as it stands now. So expect these proposals to maybe get changed or tweaked, and most importantly, we need your input. So again, that's deciding the best methods and practice of teaching gender identity and sexual orientation in public schools. The other conversation that we've been doing a lot of work on, and this is probably a bill that's going to come up next month, but basically it relates to the standards of practice of care in transgender health. So a week ago Thursday, there was a pretty explosive article written. Basically, it was an affidavit that was filed with the Missouri Attorney General's office about things that had occurred at the Transgender Health Center at Washington University, St. Louis Children's Hospital. And it is pretty shocking, morally and medically appalling is how the author described it. And so it is a conversation that's happening nationwide, and I do expect we'll be having that conversation in Iowa in terms of what are the standards of practice and care for transgender health care. This is something that does come from the state legislature. I mean, it is our job to license medical professionals, and so there's going to be a lot weighing in on this as well. The other big topics, just really comprehending the youth mental health picture. So the CDC came out with a new survey this week, and it really shows that for some reason, young adolescent women in particular are really having a hard time, and you're seeing the biggest growth in mental illness among young women. And then also behavioral health. So another thing we had this last week is we had a bunch of teachers come to the Capitol and share with us their concerns about what they're seeing in the classroom, and basically it revolves around the degrading standards of discipline and just really bad behaviors that are occurring in the classroom that are very disruptive. And that's actually a conversation that we started in 2019, and then the pandemic happened, and things have gotten, I hate to say it, but a lot worse since then. The other big thing, the Second Amendment Preservation Act passed out of the subcommittee in the judiciary. So this would basically just a good 10th Amendment style bill which would protect Iowa from enforcing unconstitutional federal mandates. In this case, the ATF has a new pistol brace rule coming out that would turn Iowans into felons if they fail to destroy these devices. And so the Attorney General's office is getting interested in that. And Judiciary Committee moved a bill. That was a bill I was a lead sponsor on with 15 other co-sponsors. So we were very excited about that because we've been working on it for a few years, and now we finally are seeing some real progress. The other big topic that we talked about at caucus this week that I'm sure will come up, also the House did introduce a bill relating to the carbon capture pipeline. It's a big bill. I think there's 9 different pieces to it total. And I know that's another discussion that's important to a lot of people. So again, we need your help, your input. It is very busy up there. I'm having a very hard time keeping on top of things, but I think the most beautiful thing that we see as representatives and legislators is when the people of Iowa get involved and really weigh in, and we see the best of our form of government, of people working together and making the best decisions for the state.
Good morning. Now? Yeah. Good morning. Thank you. Adrian Dickey, appreciate y'all being here this morning. Thank you. Thanks for the great summary of what they're seeing over in the House. You know, it is vastly different on the Senate side, and that's typically, as far as legislation, what we see at this point in the session. That's very true. There's things that, it seems like there's times where the House or the Senate will get focused on one topic of legislation, let's say it's on ag issues, and they kind of really hit through those. And then usually towards the later part of the session, then everything kind of comes together. So some of the issues that they're actually, most all the issues that they referred to, I haven't heard anything about them in the Senate at this point in the session, knowing that they will be coming up, but they just haven't been on our agenda the last few weeks anyway. And that kind of goes a little bit to our topics today, agricultural and education. I can't think of a single ag issue that I've even heard about in the Senate yet this session. Now there will be, right? But they just, that just hasn't been, that committee hasn't brought any forward. We've had no floor debate. And same on education, other than the, the school choice bill, which we spoke about in the first forum a month or so ago. So with that being said, the things I have been working on is I'm the chairman of the workforce committee. We've got 3 really big bills that we've had through subcommittee so far. One is a child labor bill. It is completely gutting the child labor laws in Iowa and modernize them, really. I mean, I've had so many parents and students reach out to me in the last couple of years about, the limitations that are in place and how they're not maybe fair to that child that isn't participating in sports but wants to work and save so they don't have the tremendous cost of college in a couple of years. We all complain about the cost of college, but the ability for a student that wants to save ahead of the college and not take on that burden is pretty limiting to them. So, and these are things that still the parents will have to sign off on. That there's a lot of stuff in the media that sounds like we're going to put these kids in the coal mines and off to slave labor camps, which is just, it's disappointing when things get twisted to that level. But that is a big bill that we're working on. Another one, we have a committee bill in workforce that's dealing with the unemployment issues. It's last year we changed from 26 to 16 weeks of benefits you'd receive if you went on to unemployment. A component we're kind of looking to add to that is the job search requirement. So if you receive unemployment benefits, you currently have to do 4 job search requirements, and really it's really 2 or 4. Right now, procedurally, they're doing 4, but I think in law it's only 2 job searches a week. Iowans have heartburn with that. If you're unemployed and receiving unemployment benefits, there's to only have to do 2 job searches for that week is a lot of people have heartburn with that. And what our bill is, what it basically is saying is the number of job searches that have to be performed are tied to the number of jobs available within the state of Iowa. Meaning if there's over, I think right now in Iowa, on the Iowa Workforce Development website, there's 79,000 or 80,000 jobs available, okay? So our bill says if there's over 60,000 jobs available, you gotta do 6 job searches a week. And that can be either a something to improve your skill set. IWD, Iowa Workforce Development, has 16 different modules to improve your hireability. That may be resume building skills, that may be interview skills, that may be, there a variety of things along those lines. So our bill says you have to do one thing like that, and then if it's 6 or more job searches, if there's over 60,000 available jobs, you got to do 6 job searches. If it's in the 50,000 range, you got to do 5, and if it's 49,000 or less, you got to do 4. Again, just tying it to if we have this vast amount of jobs available, maybe a little more effort needs to be put into it to try to find a job. And it's not a dig at all to anybody that's receiving unemployment benefits. It's not. I firmly believe we ought to want those people to aspire to want and desire more than an unemployment check. And that's just one little thing that's going towards that. Workforce apprenticeship, that's a governor's bill. We have in the last several years, she's really take that as a push, is to developing a workforce apprenticeship program. Currently, there's I think 800 and some workforce apprenticeships within the United States that are available, and those are all identified by the federal government. I think there's 13 or 15 states that currently have their own state branch, I guess, of the workforce apprenticeship programs through their Department of Labor, Department of Workforce, whatever that department is. I was looking to kind of do that same model. It's basically taking the whole catalog of what's available to the federal government, including all the regulations and requirements to take place in those apprenticeships, but bringing it down to the state level. And some people say, well, what's the significance of that when you're kind of doing the same thing? Well, it just eliminates one more step to participate in the program. You don't have to go through the state and then through the federal government to get permission. You can just do it right at the state level. it's a bill that I ran a subcommittee on last week, and in my workforce committee, I'm pretty certain on background of this, everybody voted for it. You know, the Republicans and the Democrats. It's a very nonpartisan bill, and it's really one that's, I think, would be great for Iowans. You know, not everybody. It would allow some people that, as opposed to just joining the workforce, maybe going to a labor type job or going off to college, it allows them to take a job, a position with it. It's usually a couple years. There's some education goes along with it while you're employed. The workforce has some things in place. So basically, you're developing a skill set, and at the end of the time, while you're employed, all this takes place in the workplace, at your job. Maybe it's at a particular factory. At the end of this, the apprenticeship, you get a certificate, and it's a certificate that has some value to it. You can take it; it's nationally recognized. You cross state lines, and that adds to your hireability and your skill set. So, it's something the governor started several years ago. Actually, not started, but enhanced, and we saw such a tremendous response to it that we're really looking to amp that up. Well, I guess those are the three big ones I mentioned. So anyway, I'll leave it at that and look forward to your questions.
Good.
Good morning. Can you hear me now? Hello? I'm Kim Davis from Access Energy Cooperative, Director of Member Services and Public Relations there. I have with me several of our board members today. Fred Hickenbottom, Marvin Newton, Larry White, Dave Hollingsworth, and Jerry Barker. We didn't really bring a specific question for you this morning. We just wanted to introduce ourselves to Heather and remind Jeff and Adrian that we're here to support you. We're here to be a resource for you. If you have questions, if you need help with research on any kind of issues, we're here to provide that support for you. So, Access Energy Cooperative. So we provide electricity to the rural areas in southeast Iowa. We serve 10 counties. We have 8,000 members. And then we just also want to remind you that we will be at the Capitol next Wednesday, so we hope that we can find time to visit with you personally. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to the Chamber for doing this event every month. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the three of you for coming this morning. My name is Paula Moore, and I live in rural Van Buren County. And I understand that property taxes are a burden for some residents, but I also want to note that our local governments provide important services in terms of health, public safety, parks, road maintenance, that kind of thing. One property bill has already passed and another one is under consideration. And both of these bills will result in less revenue at a time when costs are rising. My county already operates with a very lean budget. So I have a two-part question. Has Legislative Services done a fiscal analysis of the impact on local governments on these bills? And if not, will you wait for that analysis before you take action on the second bill? Will you work to backfill these funds? And if not, what do you propose counties do to handle this budget shortfall? Thank you.
Are you talking about any particular bill or just property taxes in general?
Well, the bill that was passed last week that has been sent to the governor's desk, and then there's a second one that has to do with property taxes.
Okay. Well, I'll answer the question just in general on property taxes because there's numerous bills in the House. There's several bills in the Senate. They all speak about different things. I can say right now that there's the main property tax bill in the House is very, very different than the property tax bill in the Senate. So without knowing specifically which one you're asking about, it's kind of hard to answer the question to that specific detail. But in general, overall in property taxes, number one issue, I mean, I'd say 8 out of 10 emails I receive are from people demanding property tax reduction. You know, I campaigned on property tax reduction. And I will support property tax reduction. It is skyrocketed. If you look at this, if you look at charts in the last 10 years where Iowans' incomes are, property tax are, Iowa revenue is, all adjusted with inflation. Adjusted with inflation, property taxes is just going like that. It's not even close. Now, I also understand the differences and the difficulty that causes, excuse me, at city or county levels, okay? And so when people say and demand that they want property tax reduction, I get it, I sympathize with it, but I also respond and say, and that means you're accepting that you may get less services. I mean, you can't say I want to pay less and get everything you've had before, right? So, you know, I'm fair, I think, both sides to that. I get a little peeved when the first response, when somebody from typically from city or government or let me take it back. I get a little peeved when somebody's against property taxes, which isn't very many, but it's usually more in a city or government leadership position. I get peeved when their first response is, well, we're going to cut emergency services, fire, police, EMS, and the snowplows are going to be taken off the road. You know, that gets under my skin because that's just another damn scare tactic. You know, there's some things in the state that are constitutionally protected you got to provide. And I would say if you come at me and say that, well, we're going to eliminate police or reduce police and fire protection if you cut property taxes, I'd say your priority's in the wrong spot because we got, you know, not necessarily here, but without the state, you know, water parks, art sculptures, bike trails, economic development, convention centers. There's a lot of things that cities and counties should be looking at when we talk about property taxes and not go right to the, oh, we're going to eliminate fire and EMS. The bill in the Senate right now, it's SSB 1124. It begins the process of reforming our property tax system. It does not cut. It's simply slowing the growth of property taxes. In our bill, we are not cutting your revenues, but we are trying to slow the growth because that's the issue. It's where incomes have been like this and state revenues are here, and we look at property taxes and they're doing that. You know, I'm not here to manage the counties or the city's budgets. I'm here to speak on behalf of the taxpayer, and that's what they're demanding. And I understand that in response, if you have to reduce services in some areas, I hope they're in areas, not the scare tactic areas that always are thrown out there. But I think also the citizens or property taxpayers also have to understand that if the property taxes are going to be reduced, there's probably going to be something that's being slowed or cut back as well. I will say, though, well, you asked about backfill. No, we learned a lesson from the state 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we passed a $1 billion property tax relief bill. It was $125 million over 8 years. It was taking all of the mental health funding off of the counties, you know, off of your property tax, and put in the state general fund. Okay, that was a massive move from the state to give property tax reduction. And when I say no, there's not going to be a backfill, there's not going to be something to make up for it, that's why. That bill's the reason why. When we passed that, 48 of the counties in Iowa either kept all or a good chunk of that pullback. Meaning that if your county, for example, I'll use Van Buren County. I brought this chart to figure it to come up. Van Buren County was exceptional, awesome in how they handled that. Their mental health levy that year was 33 cents, okay? What I'm getting at is many counties didn't reduce their levy by 30, or their overall by 33 cents. They kind of kept it and put it in their pocket, which was the same thing as a 33-cent increase on their residents. Van Buren County not only completely eliminated that, but then they also took another 33 cents off the general levy for their citizens. They were like the gold standard on how they handled that rollback that year. Jefferson County was very, very good. Jefferson County, I think, took, their levy that year was a little over 40 cents, and they lowered their total levy that year by 40 cents. So they passed it all on. There are counties in my district that did not do it in that manner, and and there's, again, 42 or 48 counties, I think it was 48 counties that acted in the same way. And that is the same thing as a massive, massive, massive property tax increase on their citizens. And the citizens or the property taxpayers weren't aware of it. If they weren't aware of what we did, and by lowering that, taking that mental health levy out of the equation, they would have had no idea that their supervisors or their county officials did the same thing as passing a 40 cent or 30 cent or whatever it was property tax increase on them. Because of that, that's why the State House, or at least in the Senate, and I'm on Ways and Means Committee, that's why we have a very jaded opinion on trying to backfill or subsidize any property tax reduction out of the general budget, because when we did that, we saw that half the counties basically said, well, we're going to take the money, and that's the same thing as an increase, and our citizens are not going to know about it.
Great question. I think I'll just say I agree with basically everything I heard the senator just say. Yeah, governments are stretched in their budgets, but so are people. That's something we definitely heard about a lot going door to door. Don't let the price of gas fool you. We still are very much in an inflationary environment, and anything we can do to provide more disposable income to the people of Iowa, we have to be looking at it. Just to sum up, as I was explaining as I came in here to one of our county auditors, the way we were instructed is we got to visit with our local people back home, our city councils, our board of supervisors. The bill's very much a work in progress, and it's our job to go home and get that feedback back from the local level. So it's a work in progress. I think we'll probably see a bill. I think we were told probably late March or April or so. This would be one of the last things happening at a session. But it has been a priority for many people for many years, and a lot of people are asking for it. So hopefully we can find a way to get that done in a way that doesn't, undercut services. But again, we have to ask ourselves what really is worth paying for and making sure we're getting the best use out of those dollars. And I think there is a lot of concern that sometimes local governments are not doing that. So then the state does have to make sure that the taxes are fair.
Yes, and I just want to add, budgets are complicated. They really are. And this is always a hot topic at the Capitol, and it will be before we're done at the end of April, the budget. Because we have slated for our state budget $9.1 billion. And we're going to have to decide who gets how much. Now, the thing when it comes to taxpayers versus government, one loses and one wins in the sense that in our county, we have $1 million this year slated for the Emergency Management Commission. And that is an increase of, in 2014, it was $225,000. So as a taxpayer, I challenge you guys to pay very close attention to your local budgets, because somebody's making decisions and deciding who gets how much money and for what purposes. And if you're not watching, those decisions are just made on perhaps reasons that you might not agree with. So we all know we need essential services. That's one thing we agree on. It's just how much pain are we going to cause each one of you in your pockets. And so please, I just challenge you guys to talk to your auditor, talk to your supervisors, keep in close contact with them. I've reached out to the auditor in Mahaska County, in Keokuk County, but not Jefferson. So if you're here, let's connect. We have some incredible auditors that have been in their offices for decades. Mahaska County, she's been there over 22 years, and the level of experience that I get to tap into there, I really appreciate. And so we have House File 1, which is going to specifically address the property taxes. And then this other one that you were asking about, ma'am, which was Senate File 181 that we just passed. And all that had to do with was, fixing a rollback mistake. If we didn't take that action, apparently it was going to be $133 million in residential property tax increase. So that had to do with the classification of multi-residential classification versus residential, like apartment buildings and how they were being taxed. So that was taken care of this week. And so, yeah, taxes is a big issue. So thank you for that question. I look forward to keep learning more, and especially when it comes to school budgets. Oh my, the school formula is a real beast. So just keep digging, guys, and we'll keep working with you. Thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing on that. You asked about a backfill or rollback. You know, keep in mind, especially when it comes to tax bills, you know, the House has their versions, the Senate has theirs, and typically, and especially in this case, when you look at our property tax bills, they're very different. You know, so at some point, we've got to get together and work out differences and blend 2 or 3 or 4 very different looking bills into something that can pass in both chambers. So again, it's hard to speak to specifics because it's a working bill and it will be moving until the end of session. But in the Senate bill, one of the things we're really looking at, I think there's either 18 or 22 different levies within the state that can be administered. That's a lot, and it's confusing. When people look at their tax bills, you know, they're seeing all these different things, they don't even know what they are. What our vision is in the Senate is try to consolidate a bunch of those levies, not to lower the toll not to eliminate, to consolidate a bunch of those levies and not to eliminate your ability to tax or lower that amount, but to make it so it's a little more transparent. Because what we're seeing happen is there's a lot of these little levies that just never seem to go away. They can kind of renew them, and it's a small number, and people don't pay a lot of attention because they look at their tax bill and they see the school property tax part of it or the emergency services part of it, and these little ones, they just kind of like, geez, well, thank God they're not as high as the first one. But they all add up. So consolidate a bunch of these levies that makes it simpler and easier to understand. But one of them is there's a tuberculosis levy, and I believe it's for cattle. It's when you cross state lines, they can have vaccinations or something along the line. Okay, that's, I guess, a levy. I didn't even realize that. We're going to eliminate that. In the Senate's bill, we propose to eliminate that. But knowing that it is a needed thing, we will backfill that. We will put that in the state's general fund. So that's an example. You asked if we're going to do any backfilling. That's one that we see the need. We just don't see the need that probably the property taxpayers need to be paying for it. And we're going to clean it up by putting that one in the general fund. So, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Diane Rosenberg with Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors. And my question is on agriculture. So 63% of Iowans support a factory farm moratorium. This is because of our abysmal water quality. We have 751 polluted waterways, and that compromises safe drinking and recreational waters. But it's also because living near a CAFO is a nightmare for many Iowans. I've worked with a lot of people around the state, and they basically lose their quality.
I'm sorry. I'm having a very hard time understanding you. Thank you.
All right, let me start again. Is this better?
That's better.
Okay.
With your mask off, that's much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm saying is 63% of Iowans support a factory farm moratorium. It's because of our very poor water quality, 751 polluted waterways, and that compromises safe drinking and recreational waters. And it's also because living near a CAFO is a nightmare for many Iowans. And I work with a lot of people around the state, and I can tell you their quality of life has been severely impaired, or they've gotten sick with environmental asthma, or they've lost property value in their homes, if they can even sell their homes. And it's because these CAFOs really have a terrible stench. It's a lot of suffering, and please take that seriously. We currently have 2 bills in the state legislature, Senate File 124 and House File 164, calling for a factory farm moratorium. Now, this would be a pause in construction, not a closing of current CAFO, so I want to be clear about that too. So this has been introduced every year since 2017, yet they've never even received a public subcommittee meeting hearing. And House File 164 hasn't even been assigned to a subcommittee this session. Iowans, at the very least, deserve to be heard on this issue. would you advocate for a hearing within your caucus, each of your caucuses, and would you co-sponsor, please, these bills? Thank you.
I'll say I'm not on the Ag Committee. I can ask somebody in the Ag Committee if they would run a sub on it. That's the most I can do. I'm not on the committee, so it's pretty hard for me to demand that they run a sub on it. But I will certainly ask them to. Probably not. I don't even know what's in the bill. I haven't seen SF 124, so I can't say I would support it at all. And that's not on your issue. If I haven't read a bill, I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to support it or be against it without reading it. So, okay, well, I'll take a look at it. But again, if they don't run a sub on it, you know, it's pretty hard to support something there's no sub on it. On the concept, though, of it, you know, I understand your concerns, but I also understand the concerns on the other side of the issue as well.
We're not going to ask questions from the audience.
So,
we have a microphone.
I appreciate you bringing it up, but I will ask them to run a sub for you.
Thank you, Diane. Great to see you here. And this is certainly an issue we've been talking about for many years. There's a lot of ways I could take this question. I think there's a lot to it. You know, we're talking about environmental protection. We're talking about our waterways. Ultimately, we're going to be talking about the DNR and enforcement of the various provisions that are on the books already. It's a little bit of a challenge. I think the big thing, I mean, we are in an inflationary environment where the price of food is rising. So doing something that would be opposite of producers of food would be kind of a hard sell to a lot of people, I think. The other side of the argument, Dave, would be basically property rights, that, you know, we have a code and people are allowed to do what's on their property, although typically the line is making sure one person's economic activity does not interfere with another person's activity. I've had at least one story of over in Henry County where the farm's not in my district, but the person lives in my district, where I'll probably get the details wrong, but someone was applying manure on their field, didn't do it right, washed off into the creek, and it was a pretty big environmental violation. Unfortunately, it was not properly reported to the DNR, where the DNR could have taken the proper enforcement action. So yeah, those things do happen, and they are very serious. I definitely agree this is an important issue that needs to be addressed. I'm very supportive of legislative hearings. Albeit, I mean, we have a lot of those now. So this is a very important issue, but just given, I think, the scale and scope of a lot of things we're seeing, you know, it's hard to put this on kind of the front burner, so to speak, especially, again, going back to the rising price of food. I think one thing we need to look at is the trade relationship with China. My understanding is, you know, we are very blessed to be an exporter of food. I know some people have been very critical of that trade relationship. I myself have been critical of that trade relationship. The other side of that would be, well, if China is depending on America for their food, maybe we're less likely to enter a violent conflict. So, you know, there are a lot of pieces here. I think the big thing for me is realizing that when we're producing food, cheap isn't always best. And I think we just need to be looking at a food system that really does prioritize quality, that allows consumers to get what they want. This is on a little bit of a different issue, but one of the things I was talking about this week was we know the FDA has approved a genetically engineered salmon. We haven't determined whether it's on the market yet, but you know, that's something that consumers are interested in. And I know for the consumers that I talk to, like, they're very interested in the wild-caught salmon versus the farm-raised Atlantic salmon. So, you know, consumer preferences do have a lot to this. And I think that's ultimately whatever change is going to happen. I think it's going to have to be consumer driven because I don't necessarily think the state can kind of dictate from the top down what our food system looks like. I think ultimately what we're talking about is the personal connection we have to our food, whether that's the physical connection of us going out and gardening or producing ourselves, whether it's the mental connection of really being conscious of what this food does to your body once you eat it, or the spiritual connection of realizing this is a living, breathing being, and when you eat it, it becomes a part of you. I think society as a whole is pretty removed from that level of analysis, and I think that's very unfortunate. I think that also drives a lot of our healthcare problems. So I'm certainly in favor of a hearing. I did co-sponsor this legislation before. I had to apologize for that. It was really, frankly, a mistake from my perspective. It caused a lot of problems for me. So I told people I wasn't going to do that again. But yeah, I'd worked with you in the past, and I know this is a long-term project, and I think it's, the more way we can find ways to work together. I think my just personal recommendation would be maybe find a smaller way to slice the issue out. I mean, if you're concerned about the waterways, maybe there's something more specific to ensuring water quality that we could focus on rather than kind of taking a broad brush across an entire industry, not just pork, but all other animal confinements as well. An example of this is, so for the pipeline bill, which I hope we do talk about, they singled that out specifically to carbon capture projects because they didn't want to pick the fight with other electric transmission lines or natural gas lines. So the more narrowly tailored you can make a legislative proposal, especially on something like this where it's a very big conversation that does really affect one of the backbones of the state's economy, you sometimes need to take a little bit of a smaller bite out of it to chew it around to get that conversation started, or at least that's what I've found in my experience. So, I mean, it is an important issue, and I know a lot of people are concerned, but there are a lot of people that their livelihood depends on this as well. And at the end of the day, I mean, the animal products are very popular, not just abroad, but domestically as well. So, I don't think it's enough to say, hey, we're not going to do that, but we have to be forward thinking to say, what are we going to replace it with? Or, how else can we explore or experiment or support the producers that are doing what we want to do? I know that's probably not the answer some people want to hear, but I think that's probably the most responsible way to kind of approach the issue, because it's not enough to be just against something. I mean, we need to be really proactive in building what we want to see.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Helena?
Yes, I just want to add to that real quick that, again, there's a balance. We live in one of the most agricultural states, and we're the top producer of hogs, eggs. What am I missing? Corn, of course, yes. Soybeans. And then surprisingly, some other markets that may surprise us all. And personally, I live on a very dead-end gravel road, and I live 750 feet from a hog confinement. And that was when you could still build them that close to a residential neighborhood, a residential home. Now they've actually extended that. I think it's 1,100, 1,300 feet. That's been changed a little bit. So I understand definitely the argument. I'd like to know more personally about the issue. It doesn't bother, myself, it's not actually a big problem. Even the smell hasn't been bad. We've had it there for about 10 years. And perhaps that's part of just the lay of the land, and each situation's a little different. But this is definitely a topic that I would like to have more conversation about, because I do serve on natural resources. I serve on Environmental Protection Committee and international relations. So I get to do the global look at stuff, and then also the local. So my past is in environmental science and biology. So certainly there's a very delicate balance between the land and human beings. And there's been a lot of work in the last couple of decades in the waterways, erosion, the things that they've been doing related to farming, controlling amount of pesticide, herbicides, things like that. So there's certainly been a lot of good progress. And I think that conversation just needs to keep being had. So thank you for asking that question.
Hello, my name is Eric Mishner. Okay. And my concern, Senator Dickey, is Senate File 167, the child relaxation of the rules. I understand that this would allow teenagers to work till 9 p.m. on weeknights instead of 7 p.m., so everybody seems to see this would be a great way for kids to be able to earn more money. However, what are the guardrails? Because this also allows a waiver for any employer to allow their operation to have teenagers working for them, and they would have no immunity for any problems that the kids may have. And anyone can Google and find out in North Carolina last month, there was a teenager working for a tree service who got killed by a wood chipper. And so I'd like to know what the guardrails are to prevent the dangerous jobs that teenagers really aren't able to adequately do compared with the benefits of relaxing some of the rules.
Yep, great question. Thank you. So this is a pretty good example of where our process works and really redefines things. I'm the bill manager, the floor manager of the bill. That means I run the bill on the floor in the subcommittees, but I didn't write the bill. So the bill, somebody else drafted the bill. It got assigned to my committee as a workforce committee, and being the chairman, I took ownership of seeing this bill through the process. It also gives me the ability to address and fix issues with the bill through the process, okay? So when the sub that was had 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, some of the issues you mentioned in there are not accurate, but they're not completely wrong either. I can assure you that the bill, when it sees the floor for debate, it'll look much different than what the version you're looking at. The issue you're talking about on liability on employers, that language will get cleaned up a lot, partially because it's slightly misleading. In the bill, it talks about an employer has an exemption from any liability. Where that's coming into is dealing with a school and a workforce apprenticeship, I guess you could say, where a student is working at a particular business through the school, meaning maybe a program through the school credits, etc. And in that it gets very complicated, but there's Iowa code that already establishes that in that type of situation, that the school's assuming responsibility of the student. And that even goes back to like work comp laws. So if there was an accident, they would fall, because they were doing it as part of a class, that it would fall under the school's work comp responsibility, not the employer's. I don't even completely understand it to the level, but to the point that you're addressing, that is, it needs to be reworded, and it will be reworded. As far as the hours, you asked about the hours. I got a son that's a senior in high school, and he's 18. Pretty certain that there's, and probably true with most high school students, they're not in bed by 9 o'clock. And I would rather many nights he be out working than playing games or doing some of the other things that a lot of students are doing until 9 o'clock. We look at athletic events. If you want to be on the basketball team, you're out. I mean, I was, often at home till 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and we have nobody here has a problem with that. There's practices a lot of times. They go, especially the club sports. I know a lot of kids that go participate in club sports, and they're in practices till, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, okay? So if we're okay and we're accepting of that to be in a sports or extracurricular type items, why is it that, why are we not making that same opportunity? Why are we preventing a student that wants to have a job and earn some money and save the money to buy a car or to go to college or to do whatever? I mean, I just think that's wrong. We're not making them do it. We're not making kids go out. I mean, I take a little offense to this because it comes across like it's a child slave labor bill. We're not making kids go work. But for the some that have the desire to do that, what is wrong with that? I mean, I just do not see an issue why there is a problem if a student that's a high school junior or senior or whatever, and they want to have the ambition to go to Hy-Vee or to somewhere else and have a job bagging groceries or doing something so they can get a little further ahead and not start out their life when they get out of high school in debt. Why is that an issue? When we're okay with the next student that wants to be on the basketball team and is at a basketball game until 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night because the game didn't get over until 9:30, and when we send them an hour and a half away on a school bus to play the game. No one has concerns with that. So again, the laws that are concerning child labor in Iowa, they go a long, long way back. It is time to update them. And that's what we're doing. again, the concerns you brought up is valid, and hopefully when the final bill comes out, you'll see definitely improvement in the wording of what you're referring to.
Okay, we're going to move to the next question.
And there's safeguards in there. They're not going to be working on meat packing plants. That's a misguided, I've seen so many emails. They're not going to be working on meat packing plants. They're not going to be working with wood chippers. Where that's coming from is right now in certain industries, a child under the age of 18 can't be there, right? And that's, I'm good with that, right? Pick a factory here in Fairfield, right? It may say that the child can't work there because it's a dangerous environment. The part of the bill that you're referring to says, all right, they can't work in the actual dangerous environment, but they could work in the office, right? They could work somewhere else that's completely removed from the danger. But right now, they can't even work in the office because the office is a business that has a dangerous environment that we don't want the kids in. That's all that it's doing. It's putting a little bit of common sense into the protections that are in place.
Good morning. My name is Carol Simmons. I'm here for the Iowa Sierra Club. And the Sierra Club is the largest and oldest grassroots environmental group in the U.S. I'm here this morning to talk about the carbon pipelines. So I just have a brief few sentences and then 2 questions. So as you know, there are 3 companies that want to build hazardous liquids pipelines across Iowa to carry carbon dioxide, and it's Navigator in our neck of the woods. These projects are anticipated to further enrich their wealthy investors, many or most of whom are out of state, while Iowa landowners receive only minimal compensation for the damage to their land. Worse yet, there are not yet safety standards in place that deal with the considerable and unique risks to life posed by these pipelines. Understandably, there is strong opposition among landowners and county officials and everyday Iowans. 44 counties, including Jefferson, have filed objections with the IUB, and most of those objections, if you read them, say that they do not believe private companies should be given the right of eminent domain. So I have a 2-part question. First is, there are bills introduced to both the Senate and the House that would remove the power of eminent domain from the IUB for hazardous liquid pipelines. And will you support those bills? And secondly, according to the Des Moines Register, there's a new bill from Representative Holt being floated that I believe has wide support. I believe that our 2 representatives are in support of it. And it does have some good protections, but as currently written, it would exempt both Summit and Navigator. And that may have been an oversight, or someone may have just written it up wrong unintentionally. Will you see that this bill is amended to apply to all proposed pipelines that have not yet received a permit? So part 1 is about SF 101 and HF 308. If you would support those bills to remove eminent domain. And second is make sure that whatever bills get passed apply to all these pipelines, whether they've started the process or not, but they've not been given permits, so any bills should be applicable. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. So I think you said both Helena and I did sign off on the Steve Holt bill, right? It's news to me that would leave out Navigator and Summit. If that is the case, I believe that is a mistake. I believe the intention was to be comprehensive. I got to give a thanks to the Farm Bureau. So one of the main pieces of that bill is the 90% threshold of voluntary easements prior to receiving eminent domain. I think that sounds pretty reasonable. There's a lot of interesting things about this project, and as far as the legislation was concerned, I know basically The other side is saying that if you prevent the project, that it'll decimate the ethanol industry. They came out with a report on that, talking about how their market share would be forced to shrink if they're not able to properly carbon capture and thus market their ethanol as a carbon neutral fuel or whatever. It's all very interesting in a lot of different ways. Certainly the eminent domain piece. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court in Kelo did open the door to eminent domain for private economic development things. So unfortunately, that is a possibility. The other big piece has been the local governments, so the county boards that have passed their own ordinances and are now being sued by the developers. So that's a very interesting legal issue that this bill seeks to resolve. And yeah, so I support the bill. Technically, it doesn't prevent the project, and I don't think it will. I think basically, if this bill comes to pass, it'll just be a lot more expense on the front end. But the interesting thing is the project is eligible for an 85% tax credit through however they lifted that up through the Inflation Reduction Act. So even if these companies have to shell out 10 times more money to get a voluntary easement, they're still going to be deducting that from being able to recover that from the tax credit. So whether or not the bill will actually prevent the project, I don't think so. But yeah, I certainly support House File 308. Certainly very critical of eminent domain for these purposes. But it's very interesting because, again, I think the concept of this carbon capture and is this really the best way? Why do we need to build a giant pipeline and put it underground somewhere else? Are there things we could do more local that would be less invasive, less investment to store this carbon? How would habitat restoration, say restoring native prairie, how does that impact the carbon sequestration? Has that been talked about? I think what they're selling it as is basically 10 years or in the future that the carbon capture is going to be necessary for any economic activity, and therefore they're anticipating that these pipelines have to be built to allow other industries to plug in when that time comes. So it's very interesting because, again, this carbon capture framework that we're going to be capturing our carbon and then trading carbon credits, it's basically coming from this international order. They've been building the system for, I think, the last 20 years now. And it is kind of the birth of global government in a way, where you're going to have enforcement on nation states and on states like Iowa, where we would be penalized for exhaling or producing carbon dioxide. And then you get into the state of the climate science, which is very, very controversial. So it's very interesting. I support House File 308, and I certainly support our local governments in doing whatever they need to do to protect their citizens.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Helena.
Can I just add a little bit to that? I want to make it very clear that I absolutely 100% stand in opposition to the carbon pipeline. It really is about property rights versus profits. And unfortunately, I've said this to my own colleagues that the whole entire project, like he just alluded to, is built on a false premise that is coming out of international organizations, the UN, Council of Foreign Relations, things like that do argue that we have a climate crisis and that you guys are the problem and that we need to now take major steps to reduce your carbon footprint and things like that. And in actuality, it's very dangerous and very harmful to life to actually take these particular steps. So I just want to say, Illinois recently, just this week, the Navigator is going to have to reapply for their permit. You're familiar with that. All of the property owners down there refused to give voluntary easements to store this liquid carbon dioxide under their property, and therefore they were not able to get their permits. So they're going to have to kind of start over with that, which backs up the whole project through Iowa, as you can imagine. This carbon pipeline goes entirely through diagonally Mahaska County and a little bit of Keokuk County, and then I'm not sure what portions of your guys' into that Senate district, but we have strong opposition in Mahaska County, dozens and dozens and dozens of property owners that are very much upset about this. And they're actually receiving quite a few, I just put this in my newsletter this week, some of the quotes that are coming out of them that they're being told this is a done deal, take the money while you can. Just very threatening kind of things that they've being told by the surveyors and the companies, and it's not very good. I'm not pleased with that at all. So we are having a lot of conversations at the Capitol. I have definitely signed on to Holt's bill. The thing when we come to these bills is every single little word matters. And as we piece that apart and get legal counsel and come to understand exactly the far-reaching implications of every word in that, that takes time. And please understand that this bill we just saw it on Tuesday. And of course, people are going to, in the House, co-sponsor or bring across Senator Taylor those bills. He's got 5 or 6 of them in the Senate that are going to come across to the House too. So as we examine the ways to halt this project, which is, a very, very powerful, big project, are these bills going to suffice? And I do want to invite you guys. Tuesday is a big day at the Capitol for you that are opposing the carbon pipeline. There's going to be a large rally and speakers and all kinds of stuff, so please show up at the Capitol Tuesday, make your voices heard. This is going to definitely be a grassroots effort if this is going to be stopped. So I just want to make it clear that theoretically and philosophically, I do stand very much opposed to this type of a project. And again, like all the topics that we've talked about, we've got this versus this. In this particular one, it is profit for certain private companies versus you, the landowner. And who is going to win in this, and who are we going to fight for? Because we do have to, there is not really a compromise in this one. How do you build pipelines so that the landowners aren't affected? Now, we have, in our Environmental Protection Committee, been talking to the Geological Society. We've talked to ethanol producers to examine other options, because CO2 is used in industries quite readily. And I just talked to one of the ethanol plants in Council Bluffs and asked them, they said, they can store it in their basalt chambers underneath their particular plant. And I said, well, why aren't you? Well, number one, there needs to be more surveys, more research, more data on the underground chambers there. And that would have to be done probably by the Iowa Geological Society, which doesn't have the funding. And they said, so they need to get the funding so that they can do the research to see if we can store it there. And then that's going to take 5 or 6 years, and the ethanol company said that is too long. So where are we at with that? Is it possible they can actually store this underneath their own plants? And so far, the Geological Society has been saying there is that potential, there is that possibility. And so can we pursue that? Because, that would certainly alleviate the pressure that the landowners are facing in their own rights. So, that's all I got to say.
The Senator Holt, or excuse me, Representative Holt's bill, was that in committee, or did that come from the floor?
I think I just introduced it.
I don't think it's got a bill number yet.
I think it does.
Oh, okay.
It does?
I think it just got written the other day. We caucus talked about it on Wednesday. No subcommittee yet. No subcommittee yet. No sub.
That's what I was getting at. I thought you said you'd voted or signed off on it, and it was already like, I never.
We co-sponsored it.
From what I've heard, the bill they're referring to that Representative Holt had, first off, I'm not crazy about this pipeline. As far as legislation that's out there, I think from what I've heard, the legislation that Representative Holt had seems to have a little more interest than some of the other bills that are in the Senate right now. So we'll see what they come with and take a look at them.
Rich Sims, in follow-up to Diane's question on the animal confinement issue. I just wanted to add and give some relevancy to that there are, many people who would like to farm, but the agribusiness-driven market keeps them out, and that is with traditional family farmers that have been pushed out by the big ag industry over the past 50 years. So what I'm asking is to revitalize the economy in the agricultural pig and egg industry, perhaps, in that area. If we're going to produce more healthy food, are there viable policies to support traditional, independent, small-scale farms, which is really the backbone of Iowa agriculture and a lot in the Midwest, and in a way that doesn't pollute or create nuisance for the population? And I'm wondering if you would be willing to introduce and support legislation that would structure financial incentives and policies to support a shift back to traditional, independent livestock production.
Well, so again, I think the financial incentive needs to come from the consumer. And I mean, here in Jefferson County, the Sandquist Nyman Ranch facility had nationwide accolades for what they've been doing with that certification. I know down in Van Buren County, there's all sorts of grass-fed beef operations. So there are a lot of people doing it. I think just as us as consumers need to prioritize that this is what we want. I think this has been a big thing in America, and I think you're right, in the last 50 years, we've always, as consumers, have been sold or marketed that we want it cheaper, we want it faster, we want it quicker. And I'll make the same analogy with the cellular data and the mobile devices, that we have sacrificed safety, we've sacrificed health in the name of convenience. And that's something that each person has done consciously or unconsciously, but it's been a choice that they've made. So I don't quite know what those financial incentives would look like. Certainly if it's property tax credits or something, I mean, any sort of tax credit I think would be maybe appropriate. I do have a bill to eliminate local restrictions on backyard chickens. So this is something that I guess we probably should have seen coming, but I mean, the big spike in food prices right now are in eggs, which a lot of people is a nutritional staple for their diet. And if you go back to the Great Depression, World War II, the federal government had a program where they wanted everyone to have backyard hens because they viewed it as a matter of national security and health. And so I think the more that we can, and again, it doesn't have to be, we don't all have to come out and become farmers, but the more things that each individual can do on their own to empower themselves, whether that's having a couple hens in the backyard or growing some cabbages or pickling their own cucumbers, whatever it is, a little bit goes a long way. And it's something that I think each person does have a responsibility to prioritize, because food is health. Let food be thy medicine is a popular saying that goes back. And I think when you look at the lowering cost of food, it's almost perfectly correlated that the cost of food has gone down and exactly the cost of healthcare has gone up. So there is something we urgently need to look at in there. I don't exactly know what the solution is going to be, except for every person kind of taking more personal responsibility over their diets and over the products they choose. But I think consumer-driven, and we all have to find ways to chip in and do our part. So for me, I'm very bullish on backyard chickens right now.
Jeff, I'll bring you some eggs.
Thank you.
Monday. I've got lots of birds
I would
laying
be
right
in
now.
your debt, literally.
Yes, we love our chickens. Hey, so I just want to say yes. My answer is yes. I would love to see what we could do about that. We all probably personally know some young people that are 18, 20, 25 years old that want to go into farming. They want some property, they want to farm. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because the way our culture is going away from that, young people are getting less, they're disconnecting from our traditional family farms. And so absolutely, I think that would be wonderful to see. I had some other things I wanted to say too, but yeah, that was just it. As we see monopolies in every areas of our life, a monopoly, on sales, a monopoly on what type of, energy we get to have piped to our house, monopolies on everything. We know that diversity, competition is the capitalistic view, right? And in that is strength. There's strength in there that withstands downturns in the economy, withstands problems that we have arising from just individual issues in anything. So yeah, I would love to see that. So sorry, that was a long answer. Yes. Please talk to me.
I think they said it very well. I agree with what they had to say. A little different twist on it. I wouldn't just support that, to try to help young people. I think what part of your question was to, the costs or some incentives to try to help someone to get into farming but for any business, I'm not going to single out someone who wants to get into farming. What about somebody who wants to buy a semi? It's $200,000 and be their own boss and drive a truck, right? Why about somebody who wants that's gone through apprenticeship programs and wants to become a plumber and start his own plumbing business? Okay, yes to your question, but it's not for me limited to that question. It should be incentives for anybody, especially on the younger side of things, that want to start a business, whether it be farming, transportation, trades, someone knows. I'm fully supportive of that.
Thank you.
Hello. First, thank you for setting the SSA at 3% and doing that by our law date. So much appreciated, so that we can start looking at our budget. We know that 3% is part of our general funds, and with that, we also know the cost of living has gone up at 7%. So that 3% will help a little bit towards that. My question has to do with the bills that you were talking about, Jeff, with the transgender. Where in the core curriculum and standards are you seeing that?
So right now it's not in there. The problem, as we've been seeing, is across numerous school districts. So the first time this came up was in 2021 in Ames School District, where they did have a trans-affirming coursework as a part of their Black Lives Matters week in the first week of February. And there's been some other examples as well, but it's sometimes very subtle, like basically instructing a kid to assign their preferred pronoun. So it's not right now, it's not in the core curricular standards, but I mean, certain school districts have really been pushing this in a pretty strong way and really targeting even in the grade schools. Certainly it's been in the high schools for a long time, and now in the middle schools now, and it's very tricky because I know there are educators that are of a transgender identity, and they have legal protections to be there as well, and so how do we sort those issues out? But there has been a lot in terms of just elective assignments, or again, over these kind of Black Lives Matter week where these things have come in, and I'd be happy to provide a long list of examples of the things that we've been seeing that have been motivating this discussion.
Good morning. Joe Ledger here representing Jefferson County Farm Bureau. Thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate this session. I've got several comments to make. First one has to do with the raccoon bill.
And Helena's out low. Don't me interrupt you. I think I've got 7 or 8 phone calls on that issue as well. So.
Well, I'm a retired farmer, but you get out in these cornfields, you see spots wallered out in the middle the size of the stage. And it's from the raccoons. And 20 years ago, there was a fur market for them, and the trappers was out trapping the coons. Today, there's no value to them, and they don't even get enough out of their gas, enough for gas to go and trap. So something needs to be done with them. But they've been a nuisance on my property for years, and they get eliminated. So now it's going to be legal. Next comment.
Well, don't go get excited yet. It just was out of her committee. It's not law yet, so don't want you get in trouble. I don't expect there to be problems with going through the process, but
I always tell Bart that nothing's illegal till you get caught. So, on the eminent domain, it's It's being abused. It was designed for public interest, and there's too many privates that come in and use eminent domain, and something needs to be addressed on that. And in this county, we have a problem with our ambulance services, a lot of people know, and we're transitioning over to a county-owned ambulance. And it's very painful what they're going through. I've been sitting in a lot of budget hearings with the supervisors, and boy, they're trimming budget. It's painful what they have to go through to do this. And to get this ambulance up going, it's going to be very painful to this county too, as far as tax-wise and stuff. And I just want people aware of that. Thank you.
Joe, are you proposing that we raise property taxes on ag values to help offset that? That's what I'm talking about earlier. I mean, everybody wants to complain about property taxes, and we understand everybody, not everybody, vast majority of Iowans think our property taxes are too high.
Well, but
there's cuts then. I mean, where is the cuts? And I understand the hospital, the ambulance issue is a difficulty. All right, so are you proposing that we come up with more funding for that? If so, where from? Because we can't cut property taxes and then increase funding on the other issues.
I don't know what the answer is, but everybody in here, if they have a problem, medical problem, they want to call an ambulance, they expect them there within a few minutes. They don't want them to have to come from Ottumwa or Mount Pleasant and be a half hour. And it's an essential service. It's not a money maker. If it was a money maker, then why doesn't the fire department or the police department, sheriff's department, why don't they make money? It's an essential service. And no, I'm not proposing raising taxes, but we do need an ambulance service in this county too. And they're trying to figure it out as hard as they can.
I agree, and I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, Joe. It was just that was kind of emphasize the point. It's easy to say cut taxes, but then there's another side to that consequence to cutting taxes, and it's the difficulty of funding things. So I just want people to think about that when there are two sides to those issues. Thank you, Joe.
Well, a couple of years ago, we did make the emergency medical, that is an essential service, and then the county did decide to levy that as an essential service. Is that the status?
Yes, there's a levy for that.
So, I mean, that was a serious problem. I mean, our colleague, Representative Phil Thompson, that's why he came to the legislature in 2018, is because his mom had an issue and called 911, and it was an ambulance that never came. Didn't just come an hour or 2 hours, the ambulance never came. Part of this is the workforce discussion. We have a shortage of emergency paramedics and EMTs and people who can actually provide these services. So it's a big problem. But yeah, I would definitely agree that ambulances is an essential service that should be funded first before we maybe fund some of these other pet projects.
And I just want to add too, I am aware that Jefferson County is getting ready to add their emergency management into a countywide levy. There's about 5 different ways that you can fund those, and they are specifically more for, addressing, like natural disasters and how to respond to emergencies and things like that. So it's a little bit separate from your ambulance, police service, and things like that. But I mentioned the $1 million budget that our county faces in our EMC right now because we have had a lot of problems with an uncapped levy in our county, and this is occurring in quite a few counties around the state. And so again, when you ask if these services are going to be provided, who's going to pay for them and how are they going to pay for them? So as you make that balance and you try to answer those questions, you have to have engagement. You guys have to be engaged in these conversations. So please do. Please do.
Last question.
Okay, I had one more. On Helena, I appreciate you saying that the bills that you look at every word, and you have the lawyers that look through every one of those to make sure that it's the whole part of it. Do you know that our school policies are also the same way, that we look at every word and we have lawyers that look through those? And then the other part, you had talked about having a group from Des Moines that are coming up to talk about their policies and about the book reconsiderations. There are 8 policies within the Fairfield Community School District that speak about to pull books. If somebody has an issue with the book, that they can pull those. And then as you're looking at the books that you would like to have banned, I would like to know if you have read those books in totality, not just a paragraph, but the entire book. So the books that are out there, you can find them on tape, you can listen to them as you're driving, to read the whole part of it so that when you're looking at them, you're understanding what you're asking to be banned. And if they're in the library, they're not part of a curriculum. They're there for choice. So just some comments about that, please.
I don't need to read the books. I don't need to read the full book. I see the pictures that are in some of these books that we're talking about, and that's enough for me to say this is garbage and has no damn place to be in our schools, period. If anybody here, and I'm sorry, here's the hardest part about this. I don't think anybody here, I really don't, understands the pictures and the graphic nature that are in these books. And I will show you, if you want to come see me afterwards, I will show you. I got them on my phone because so many people come to me, they're like, why are you banning these books? Why are you for this? Why are you blah, blah, blah? And then I show them the pictures, and there's not been one person in 2 years that has come to me with that issue. After I show them the pictures, there's not one person that has to go, oh, wow, I understand now. There's many of them, but still, why though the people that want to offend these books, they're defending all of them. Okay, don't point out just the gender queer. There's more than just that one. But why are you defending that one? It's not in our library. But it's in many libraries in the schools. That's the problem. When everybody that's on your side of this issue, I'll give you a little advice. Having your position's one thing, but then put a little common sense into it. Don't say, you cannot ban any books, period. Come out and say, we agree with you. These books really have no way to be in our school. If they're not in your schools, great. I applaud you for that, right? But there's schools that do. And those are, when you talk about this legislation, it's dealing with all the schools that some schools pick these books. And there's no point for them. There is no point. If I show these pictures to a minor right now, I could be arrested for distribution of pornography. Any of us. If you showed it to a minor, that's it. It meets the standard. Why in the hell, then, are we allowing these to be in our public schools? Okay?
Thank you, Lori.
Just to be clear, no one's initiated a book removal process for your district? At least I'm not aware of any.
Several years ago, we had one that was a graphic novel that the committee put together, and they all read the book in its entirety and felt as a community, parents, students, educators, that it was appropriate to keep in the library.
But not within this recent couple 2-year period, you haven't any issues? Well, so that's great news. And yeah, that has been, so this has been parent-led, and I think you're absolutely correct, because the way the obscenity kind of law works is the work taken as a whole, that it would need to lack serious artistic, literary, political, or scientific value in order to qualify for obscenity. But to Senator Dickey's point, he's absolutely correct that also the way the law is structured now is there is a complete exemption on obscene materials in public schools. So I could, not saying anyone's doing this, but as a hypothetical example, you could have a Hustler magazine or a Penthouse or a Playboy in a school district, and that would be legal in Iowa law. So there's been a lot of concern around that education exemption, because it is true, this double standard, where if I gave this book, Let's Talk About It, that has very graphic depictions on things that I never learned about and I'm probably better off not learning about, it would be a serious misdemeanor under Iowa code. But at least to the parents who have been bringing this forward, they have read the article or the books as a whole. I think one of the things I brought up on how I kind of come down on this is a lot of the books that are problematic are fictional, whereas I place a lot more value on an autobiographical or a nonfiction account. If something really happened, I think that probably stands to have a lot more educational value. So yeah, these are very interesting discussions. I think we're waiting to see some legislation on that, but it's tricky because we do have some Supreme Court rulings that basically articulate that the definition of obscenity is very hard to pin down, as the Supreme Court even noted, because it does rely heavily on a subjective analysis of whether or not it has literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And certainly anything on transgenderism could easily qualify for political value. So it's tough, but I think what we want to make sure is done, and also the point that you made about assigned reading versus in the library is also a very critical distinction that we're well aware of. And I think that's where, at least from what I've been talking to, we really want to focus is on the assigned reading element, but that also if there are titles that we can agree qualify or at least are arguably obscene, that they would not be in the general selection, but maybe need to ask a librarian for it. Just wouldn't be on just display for anyone to grab, but might be kind of tucked away on a back shelf somewhere else. Because again, when we talk about these books that are graphically describing teenage prostitution, drug use, rape, molestation, incest, again, if you went to my personal library and you said, hey, Jeff, what are you doing with all these books about kids doing drugs and raping each other? You might think I was a little odd. I mean, the books we have on our library shelves really do say a lot about who we are as a people, and they are, the literature is a reflection of the institution. So I think that's what we want to do. Going back to what I initially said, it's the state of Iowa needs to define the contemporary community standards for what's suitable for minors, and that's certainly a conversation we all need to have together.
Go ahead, Helena.
Yes, go ahead and give him a round of applause. Very good. Yep, and I just need to say this too. And oops, am I on? Nope. Okay, so yeah, I am in agreement with I think most of us here that that pornography and obscene material, and they are defined in the Iowa Code already, and you can read all the description if you want. It goes into detail. They are not what is considered appropriate material for children. It is not healthy kinds of ideas to put into young minds that are very impressionable and vulnerable. And it has nothing to do with LGBT or banning books. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with children being children and letting them just learn and read and grow and explore, but not be sexualized. Unfortunately, some of these ideas come from a researcher back in the Alfred Kinsey, yeah, who believed that children are sexual beings from birth. Now, of course, we all have those organs, but we aren't, those kinds of things don't happen, biologically in our bodies until puberty, and hormones begin to change and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of this material is being brought in because of sex ed programs and other, there's a comprehensive sexual education that's being attempted to be brought into all schools that would teach some really, really graphic things that children they just don't need. It's not healthy. Again, it is not about LGBT and it's not about banning books. I do want you to know that I introduced a bill this week that will basically specify that obscene material, as defined in the code, all those words, every little word, and hardcore pornography, they're not regarded as appropriate material under this exemption for schools and for public libraries. There are actually schools that are assigning some of this in their curriculum too. They have to read a book called Push or some other ones that are just not healthy. The education system for years, you guys are all older here. I don't think there's anybody here that's under 25, 30, 40. We come from a generation where public schools were wholesome, and the teachers, they looked out for our character. They wanted us to be hard workers. Back to your workforce stuff, when my youngest is almost 18, and when he was 14, I'm like, dude, you need a job. And I couldn't get him a job anywhere. We couldn't find a place that would hire a 14-year-old, even Fairway, he couldn't even bag. And that's really frustrating, because what do we want our youth to be doing with their time? They have time. They do. If they're not in school or in some of these sports that really eat up a lot of their time, there's a lot of them that are they're burning time. And what do we want them to be productive, and how can we challenge them to grow? And some of this material is not taking them down a healthy path. We all know the studies of pornography and how harmful that can be, and how it can break up a lot of relationships, marriages, and it just leads to further and further sexual activity. Do you think, in my district, I've spoken, guys, we put a lot on them. We expect so much from them, and they are molding and they're shaping our very future when they pour themselves into these children. They are really key players in the very fabric of our society. So we need strong schools. We need good teachers. And they need to be people of character. And so, yeah, I intend to spend a lot of time with the education. I requested education committee, but I didn't get on it. So, but that's okay. The environment matters too, and natural resources. So, but I'm having a lot of conversations about this, and please be aware that there's a lot of discussion when it comes to gender identity, transgenderism, the obscene materials. It's a huge, huge topic in the House, anyway. I'm not sure if it is in the Senate, but many of the people that were voted in recently in the primaries and stuff had major concerns about this, and so we are definitely trying to address what we are seeing in some of the schools and some of the things occurring. So, thank you.
All right, so join me in thanking our local lawmakers for taking time out of their busy Saturday mornings. We also want to thank our sponsors, many of which who are here, so please say thank you to them. They make this possible, they make it free, and they give you coffee and donuts. So, I mean, come on. So Freeman Cavanetti's Law Firm, Access Energy Cooperative, Fairfield Community School District, Sierra Club, JFAN, and of course the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, and our friends at Fairfield Media Center. We'll be back here again on March 18th. I invite you on Thursday to come to Scarlett and Company Plus events right across from Jet Gas for business after hours that was moved because there was going to be a snowpocalypse. You guys didn't have it. We had it in Watch here. So safe travels. Thank you for coming, and have a wonderful weekend.